I mean, it did have such a big presence in the town, not just the people, but the building itself. It took up a huge corner site in the town centre.
If you think of how many hundreds of different people have worked at the brewery over the years, and the families that they represent were all Sunderland families, so you only need to mention the Carters, the Wrights, people like that.
I think everybody either had someone work there or knows someone who worked there, and even now it brings back those memories.
Well, I mean, first of all, it meant employment, obviously, but it also it entertained people as well, because they went to the bars and the pubs and they drank the beer that was coming out of Vaux and enjoyed themselves, and rightly so, because they'd had a hard day at work. And that was the place where, you know, they relaxed and met friends and family. So Vaux was providing a leisure industry as equally as providing employment and brewing a good ale.
Well, it dates back to the same year, funnily enough, that the City Council or the Borough Council received its Royal Charter, 1837. So Cuthbert Vaux started then, aged 24 or whatever, and that removed some of the controversy that existed, because some people said Vaux started in 1806, when in fact Cuthbert wasn't born until 1813. So we got it right in the end.
If you could get into Vaux,
yes,
you did really well.
Because it was the biggest place, wasn't it, in town, more or less. Well, it's certainly in the town centre. It was very old-fashioned, would you say?
We talked about this, didn't we, earlier, about we remember the girls weren't allowed to wear trousers. Can you imagine now at work, somebody telling somebody they couldn't wear trousers?
We were coming out of the brewery one day, and Sir Douglas at the time, Paul and Frank's dad, stopped his Bentley and shouted at us to get, I had a longer hair, you had to get your hair cut. If you had long hair, you wouldn't stand for that.
They were filming at the brewery, and we all had to hang out windows and things, like several of us down on the pavement outside.
Do the V sign.
And it was something like, if you want good beer, make the V sign.
V's a sign you want, a pint of Vaux. Yes. They made us practice and practice, and we knew the whole song.
Yes.
And I don't think we were on about 3 seconds. We just saw some hanging out the window.
Very quick advert on TV, but
They invited people into Vaux to see how it was going. The Nicholson family sort of embraced the whole of the city and looked after it, you know, it was amazing.
Well, the chapter I wrote on the closure of Vaux, and instead I finished the chapter with a quote from a letter from Alan Ogden, our former public relations advisor to the group. What struck me was that the values the company had worked so hard to instill and live up to: transparency, openness, believing in people, care of the community, all seemed to be sacrificed on the grubby altar of spurious shareholder value. So the shareholders did fine. But the people who lost their jobs didn't.
We were a big family, and the tragedy in our closure lay in the complete disruption of that marvellous family. And we endeavoured to run the business as efficiently and effectively as we could, but we could only do that with the goodwill and the support of a marvellous workforce.
They've gone through a lot in Sunderland. They supported shipyards, mining, and of course we have the glass industry, which dates back quite a number of years, and the people really worked hard at that.
It's always good to have an element of the past in what we're doing today, so especially in these new buildings that we're putting up, having this reminder of what the site once was and what once went on there. It's good for the next generation coming through, so it gives them a sense of pride that They're standing on such a historic ground.
What we have to do is potentially look back, learn lessons, make changes to help us build a better future. Because as a people, we're just the same. We need to motivate ourselves in different ways, and part of that is knowing where you come from.
What a tragedy if a town doesn't use its history as a way of moving forward. I have immense pride in the fact that Vaux was very much part of Sunderland, in the same way that those who worked in the shipyards, the pits, the glassworks, etc., will have had the same pride in the town. But for me, of course, nothing could ever replace the Vaux bit of my pride.
I mean, our horses, I don't think I've even drawn horses before, let alone actually made them in life-size steel. But that's the challenge, that's what I'm here for. If I felt I couldn't do it, I wouldn't have dared take it on, but I do feel, you know, I did feel like I could do it justice. I might have, you know, I might have fell down, I still might, it hasn't been put out in public yet, so, but hopefully it'll be received well enough to sort of people think, well, yeah, he has studied that and he has done it right. But yeah, I mean, there's always that element of, can I do this, can I do that, to a certain extent, but, you know, if you let that dictate things, nothing would ever get done.
As the years went on during the course of the 20th century, so breweries got rid of their horses completely, and by the time that Vaux closed, there were probably only 3, maybe 4 other breweries used horses. And it has to be said, they used horses partly for efficiency, close to the brewery to deliver, and partly for marketing.
When you look at the dray and horses, which went a long time ago, people still evoke that strong memory of dray and horses.
I remember when they used to put the big dray horses out to pasture for the holiday up near Penshaw, fabulous animals. And of course, a lot of the lads who worked on the drays, you know, didn't have built some muscles up, heaving them kegs about and getting them into the cellars. And of course, the horse pulling the carriage behind with the kegs on was quite a sight. We were used to it. And then, of course, I remember when they used to do a new brew, the smell of the hops across the city was just unmistakable. You knew there's a new brew going on. You know, it was just a fabulous place to be, and they catered and looked after their people, their workers, very, very well.
My personal memories of the drays were the later ones. There was steel dray, and they had car pneumatic tyres on, which didn't have the same character. So, you know, I wanted to hark back to the old wooden wheeled, steel rimmed drays that, you know, people would sort of, like the iconic version of it. For the horses, I found out that there were Percherons. I'd never even heard of a Percheron. I've known nothing about horses up until this process. But I found out that there was 2 in Beamish Museum. And I got in touch with, through a mutual friend, the fellow who looks after them up there, and he gladly welcomed me along to, you know, got the horses out and to take a load of photos, and then he tacked them all up, put them onto a cart, which wasn't a Vaux's cart because they haven't got one, but it just sort of showed us what the tack was like. So that was the horse side done. The dray, Beamish did have a similar cart, but as it turns out it was a much heavier design. It was a railway one. So that had to be modified, and basically after that I couldn't find an original Vaux's dray. Somebody after seeing this interview would say, well, I've got one in the backyard, but at the time I couldn't do it. So it was a case of going to Eddie Mahoney, who was one of the, you know, the long-term draymen, still lives in Sunderland, and it's been a massive help. He would come out at the drop of a hat and tell me, you know, that's not right, that needs to be different, you've got that spot on, or wherever. And it was a case of fiddling through basically like that, the same as what I would call barrels, but they're not barrels, they're casks. So getting the right sizes, getting the right shapes, all of that has to be, you know, researched and looked into, because there's always somebody who'll tell you that's not right. And then the draymen themselves, Eddie still had all his gear. So he came through and he actually sat for it with the full apron on, the long coat, the bowler hat. So all of that it was a really enjoyable process because there were so many different aspects to what I normally do, and it was hard work, but hopefully the end result will justify it.
Percherons and the Gelderlanders, which were the horses we had at the brewery, were and are the friendliest breed of horses you can imagine, so that anybody who stopped to pat them would be greeted by them suitably, and anyone who gave them a piece of sugar would be greeted even more so.
You had your own pair of horses. The original idea for that was when Colonel Flood was in charge, you see. If there was anything wrong with those two horses, you couldn't say, oh, he had them out last week. No. You have them, you look after them. If there's anything wrong with those horses, it's your responsibility.
And our pair at the time were Silver and Jacko, they called at the time. Mine was Jacko, had a pink nose, and he looked after Silver, and he taught us everything about the horses in France.
I've always said it's a difference between craft and art. Craft is doing the dray and doing the people. The art is sort of getting a bit of narrative in there and getting a reason for it being there. That's why I put the words on, the stories to go on them to sort of encapture that, what's going on in that moment. But that's the sort of a different level of interest part. So hopefully people can come along and look around the details of the dray and look around the scale of it and what have you. And if that's all they want to look at, that's fair enough. But hopefully if they want to look deeper, they can look deeper and find something that's going on. So I mean, the piece is called Gan Canny, and it's the drayman saying to the boy, Gan Canny with the sugar, because it's me that's hanging on the reins, and you give him too much sugar, I'm going to be flying around Sunderland like something not right. So you try to sort of, there wasn't too much in the way of it wasn't like the 1101 piece where you've got a really deep, sorrowful, background to it. It was always a nice thing, so you don't want to put a dark edge to it. It was you're just trying to create a moment that somebody can relate to.
Riverside Sunderland is very much about redeveloping what we have here. So as well as the office blocks you can see in the background, the beam and our own City Hall, there will be a new eye infirmary. Absolutely fabulous to have that in the centre of town. There will be housing on this site, which won't be just the traditional housing. It's going to be very much focused on carbon neutral systems as much as possible. And it's that bit about linking up the seafront with the city centre and moving forward. I think people have want to live in different places. Now people do want to live in town centres, whereas at one time everyone wanted to live out. So, you know, it gives people options.
What can often happen is you've got your sort of ideal scenario, the ideal thing that you want to create, and either the budget doesn't allow it or some other thing will sort of mean that it's got to be curtailed and compromised on. But fortunately in this case it wasn't, that didn't happen. So that is the first idea, the one that is normally cut back, but it wasn't cut back, so that was great.
It's really important that it goes on what was the Vaux site for people who remember that, and I'm pretty sure we will have a lot of people bringing their children and grandchildren along and say, look, that's where I worked, that's the sort of thing I did.
Did that really happen? Is that really how industry, brewing industry, worked in the past? And hopefully those who are showing them will say, well, yes, it was exactly how it used to work.
This gave us the opportunity to do the full dray, the horses and a couple of figures. It meant that I could sort of tell more of a story and really show that iconic part of Vaux's brewery. It's not just that it was a brewery, there's breweries all over the place, but it was that they kept this this horse-drawn dray thing going for a lot longer than was practical.
Ultimately, it's a focal point for people to go up and ask the questions of what was there, what did they do? Because as people are getting older, we're losing this information and we're losing the stories. So it's a good way of getting the younger generation to go up to their parents and their grandparents and ask them what went on here.
I'm absolutely delighted. Of course, if you reflect on the old saying that used to be around, that rather like if the baboons ever left Gibraltar Rock, if the ravens ever left London Tower, if the horses ever left the brewery, it was the end of that institution. And that was what it was. So seeing a recreation is perhaps a restorer of some of the pride and some of the effect of the horses in Sunderland.